here in the perimeter, there are no stars. Out here, we is stoned, immaculate.
Hello and welcome. This is the C86 show. I'm David Eastaugh. As always, we love a special guest. In fact, there's two. This is going to be Middle of the Road. Yes, the Scottish pop band who had huge success in the 60s and also 70s with their classic track, Chirpy Chirpy Cheep Cheep, which we all loved back at the time. So this is the interview with two of the members of the band. This is going to be Sally Carr, vocalist, and also Ken Andrew, who was the drummer of the band as well. So, just a little bit of a heads up. This was a three-way conversation, which was quite tricky, via landline, which I'd never done before. And generally, it's all right. There was one little technical glitch, which meant that the first part of the interview, Sally, who was at the interview to begin with, sort of drops out, and I thought she'd just disappeared, but she hadn't. She was just waiting to come back online, which she didn't. So then, I know this is a lot of details here, so I just finished the interview with Ken, and then the next day I phoned Sally and we have a one-to-one conversation. So that part of the interview takes place after about, I don't know, an hour, say, and then you'll have Sally. There were a few little technical issues, but she does have some amazing stories, and so does Ken, in fact. So if you're interested in Middle of the Road, then fill your boots. If you're not, then who knows. Anyway, look, as always, after several minutes of interesting but casual chat, we get down to the exciting subject that was the early formative years. Ken, Sally, it's over to you.
Well, when I was younger, I loved Brenda Lee. Have you heard of her?
Oh, yes, Brenda Lee, because my dad...
Brenda Lee and Dusty Springfield.
Right. There you go. And did you have kind of musical parents or a musical household at this stage?
My father used to say he could knock a tune out of anything. My father was a miner.
Right.
But he had a very good musical ear. So he would sit down at the piano. We always had a piano in the house. And he would go up and down the keys until he found a tune. And then he would he almost made the tunes up as he was going along. But my brothers were all musical.
Right.
My oldest brother, he played the saxophone. I had four brothers. The next brother, he played the drums. And what else did he play? He played something else.
Hmm.
And then the next brother, what a voice he had. He was, as far as I was concerned, he was far better than Pavarotti.
Right, so you're all...
What a voice.
You could have been like the sort of Scottish version of the Osmonds, really, couldn't you, with that musical...
Probably. And then my younger brother, he didn't play any musical instruments, but he had a fabulous voice again. So in a way, I suppose, my mum had a beautiful voice too. My mum was from a Welsh background.
Right.
So she had a lovely voice, very, very sweet and melodic. Yes. So maybe in a way you could say, they were just hard-working people, my family. You know, that my father was a miner.
Yes.
So we lived hand to mouth, if you know what I mean.
Well, absolutely. Yes, that was it. That generation, really, wasn't it? The post-war generation.
Yeah,
but I guess your parents would have lived through 2 world wars, really, wouldn't they, as well? So they probably knew a lot. And I do remember an interview that Bill Shankly once said, which was a bit of a sweeping statement, but he said, you know, you had 2 choices. You worked down the pit or you played football. Mostly people went down the pit. Were opportunities quite hard to come by during that period for you? And
No, not for my dad. There was no other option. Very poor family. And as he used to say, he went to school with his backside out of his strides. That was his trousers.
Yes.
And no shoes in his feet, but he said them in a different way. I'm saying it quite politely.
Crikey. Yes.
And he was down the pits from the age of 11.
Right. Well, because my dad went to work when he was about 14 or 15, having to get to a place 4 miles away, and I think he had to walk most days and then walk back. So it was tough. And Ken, what was your kind of background in kind of musical awakening? Did you have anything similar to a family of musicians, or were you a bit different?
Well, my father and my uncle used to play the piano quite a lot in the house. It was before the days of us listening to the radio that much, and my father just played by ear, which I always found rather difficult because I thought hands were used for the piano, but that's another matter.
My dad was the same, Ken.
Yeah, he enjoyed his music, and I enjoyed listening to it. But I think probably the thing the group that made me most interested in pop music, I hate to be so boring, but it was the Beatles. I mean, when they started, my sister used to buy all the records because I knew she was very keen on them, and I wanted to save money, so I let her buy the records. And she got quite a number of albums, and I used to listen to them quite a lot. I loved the gentle harmonies that they had. But my real start in music was my cousin who played the drums. He was a jazz musician, and he enjoyed playing the drums. And he taught me. He got me a practice pad, which was basically a lump of wood with a cork mat on it, and provided me with a pair of drumsticks. And he said, "Right, I'm going to teach you how to play the drums." So I learned to play the drums on a cork mat. It probably sounds like that, actually, in some of the recordings we did later on. I didn't like the sound of the drums. But the thing is that got me into it, and I enjoyed jazz, a lot of jazz, trad jazz, some modern jazz, and I used to just play on this cork mat. Although that was then moved on to a dictionary. Now, you may find that rather odd that I was playing the drums on a dictionary, but I could put a thick dictionary on a wooden table, and the bass drum was the sort of palm of my hand, and my fingers played what the snare drum would normally play. So I would sit, listen to the radio, and play this dictionary. And it was really quite amusing because we lived in a flat at the time, a tenement in Glasgow, and people down below kept hearing this drumming noise. And they came up to the door, knocked on the door, and they said, "Somebody playing the drums in here." And we could genuinely say, "No." And they went away. So my drumming started with cork mat and a dictionary.
Yes.
But the music side of it was jazz I enjoyed, but I definitely enjoyed listening to the Beatles as well. And it went on from there in the 60s. As you know what happened in the 60s, I think.
Yes.
Long for that, but it did develop, and some of the pop stuff was just amazing.
Well, absolutely. You were there at the... So, Sally, when you got to that ripe old age of 15, 16, at that stage, did you stay on to do things like O-levels or CSEs that I had when I was growing up? Did you leave school at... Because that would have been about 1959, 1960, wasn't it?
What, is that me?
Yes.
No, I left school at 14 and a half. I exempted myself from school because my mother was an invalid and she needed me.
Right.
And she did become bedridden eventually and died very young. And I exempted myself from school to look after my mum.
Right. So
and I always remember the rector. The day I was leaving school, it was the only time you got to walk out of the front door in the school. And he said to me, "You'll regret this till the day you die." And when we got our very first hit, I went back to try and find him and say, "Hey, Mr. Breen, I don't regret anything." So anyway, I didn't get to see him. He'd left the school.
Right.
But I left school, as I say, I left school early to look after my mum. But then my dad, he always said that I had talent. And he said, "You're not going to waste your life here. You're going to get a job." And always fancied being a hairdresser. So he got me a job in a hairdressing salon in Glasgow. He says, "We'll work out something for your mum. Don't worry, your mum will be fine." we'll take turns between me and the boys, and you as well, and we'll work out something to look after Mum. And I started out as a hairdresser.
Yes, well, I guess...
And that was actually what started me in the musical career, because I was singing. I was always singing, and there was a group playing in a little pub in Glasgow, and the girls in the salon said, "Come on, we're going to go there, and you're going to go up and sing." And that was it.
Wow, you discovered the stage, and at that stage, had you sort of, as the 60s kind of approached, or more than approached, but it sort of began, were you also aware of that kind of the rise of pop music and people like the Beatles and Stones and the Kinks?
I didn't like the Beatles. I was a Mick Jagger fan.
Right, well, there you go.
She had no taste at all.
No, you had no taste. Sorry.
Yes. So,
No, I was a Mick Jagger fan. I just thought he was the most fantastic, talented musician and performer. He was brilliant. And lots of people used to think he was a drunk. He wasn't a drunk.
no, my
He wasn't a
God.
drunk. He was a very, very intelligent man, very, very clever. And I just thought he was so talented musically.
Yes.
And that was... So I was a Mick Jagger fan, and Dusty Springfield
Well, absolutely.
earlier on, as I said, and Brenda Lee.
So was the, because we hear a lot about the 60s, the swinging 60s in London, what was it, the 60s like in Glasgow? Did you sort of pick up that kind of the cultural shift of sort of pop music, and then that change of sort of, I suppose, psychedelia as we got to the mid-60s?
I wasn't from Glasgow. I was from a little mining village
Right.
away out in the sticks. So we didn't have anything like nightclubs or anything like that. If there was a dance in a village hall, maybe in the next village, they would put on a little minibus. A group of friends would put on a wee minibus, and we would go together to this dance. And it was just, they were in, like, public halls and things like that. Ken, probably because he's from Glasgow, he knew more about nightclubs and things, but I knew nothing about nightclubs, to be
Yes.
truthful.
So what was the first record or single or first concert that you went to?
First concert I went to, it was Brenda Lee
Right.
in the Empire.
God, that's very cool. Yes, my dad was a massive fan of Teresa Brewer. I don't know if you remember people like Teresa Brewer and...
I know the name, but I don't know who she is.
yeah, she's one of those, and Kay Starr and people like that. I just remember, and then obviously Elvis Presley and Buddy Holly and people like that. So, God, Brenda Lee there, that would have been incredible. So as the 60s progressed, were you still hairdressing kind of during this period?
Yes, I did. I was hairdressing right up till I met the boys. I met Ken and the other boys.
Yes.
And I was still hairdressing and doing gigs at night with them in pubs and clubs and things.
Yes.
But then I still did hairdressing. Then it got to the stage where it was becoming too much. And my father said to me, "You're burning the candle at both ends. And one day, the two flames are going to meet." And boom. So he said, "You better sort yourself out." And I decided, then we all decided to go professional.
Yes.
So I left hairdressing then. So I was a hairdresser for 10 years and then became a singer.
Yes, and Ken, you mentioned the Beatles. So how did your, and in being in Glasgow, so how did your 60s, how did you navigate your 60s, and what was your kind of first single and first concert?
Well, believe it or not, I didn't go to any concerts, and I barely bought a single. I listened to the radio a lot, to be perfectly honest, at the time. And I used to listen to not the Top of the Pops, Pick of the Pops, I think it was.
Yes.
And I enjoyed that. And then this sounds terrible, but I did record them on tape and then just listen to them. And it was that got me into enjoying pop. But I started, as I say, when I started with jazz at the beginning, but I went to university, and at university I formed, well, I didn't form the band, but a band was formed, and I played the drums, and we did a lot of country and western type material, usually, I've forgotten the name of the guy now, the American guitar player. It was most, not vocals, it was mainly instrumentals, and we also did shadows type material. All that sort of stuff was how I sort of got to doing things on the drums.
Yes.
And at the end of the day, the band that I was in, we're talking about nightclubs. We actually opened a nightclub in Bearsden in Glasgow, and it was a club you had to join, because in those days they preferred to have control over membership and all the rest of it, and that went very well. And from that's where, in fact, I met Ian and Eric, who were the guitarists that finally became part of Middle of the Road.
Yes.
And it was they asked me if I would leave the band I was with and join them in something else, and I said no, I'm quite happy where I am at the moment. And I left that for about a year, and then he phoned me again and said, look, we would like to form a proper band together. Would you like to come and play in the Denison Pally as an interval group? And I said, yep, fine, okay, I'll do that. And I got myself a proper drum kit instead of a mixed up one that I was using. And from there on, we played at the Denison Pally for dancing. And then that moved on to, we became part of what was called Jan Douglas and the Douglas Boys. Jan Douglas was a Glasgow singer who had a sort of minor hit, but she did a lot of radio performances, and she decided at the end of the day that she would give up. She didn't really want to get involved in the pop side, which left Ian, Eric, and myself without anything to do, as it were. So we joined another band. This is all before Sally, of course.
Yes.
We joined another band called Karen and the Sophisticats.
Nice.
And Karen and the Sophisticats played at supper dances, etc., Saturday night, Friday night type dances. And we enjoyed that for a while until Karen took ill and had to go into hospital. And we had to find another girl singer. And guess who?
Yes, my God.
She was in her hairdressing salon, and she didn't know anything about this, but when she sang one night at one of the clubs that she'd been invited to, we listened to her, and I thought, oh, that sounds quite good. So at the end of the day, Sally was hooked, and we formed a group called Part 4.
Right, Part 4. Part 4. Yes. Yeah. There you go.
She was a big part of that, of course, because her voice was terrific, and we used to. She did a lot of. Who was it that you said you liked again?
Brenda Lee.
No, it was
Teresa Perua.
No, Sally. Who is it that you said that you liked? No, she can't remember. This is what happens when you get to a certain age. You sort of forget.
No, my God, yes, tell me about it.
Connie Francis was one of them. She did Connie Francis stuff. And Dusty Springfield, that's what I'm talking about. I forget Dusty, she was absolutely fabulous. I certainly agreed with Sally there that Dusty Springfield's material was terrific.
Yes. So, Ken, just as a curious thing, because you mentioned the world of, like university, which would have meant O-levels, A-levels. So what was your degree in at this stage?
My degree was nil because my father wanted me to go into electronic engineering, yes, which was a thing at that time. And I said, well, okay, I quite enjoyed working with hi-fi and all that sort of thing. I thought, I'll try and learn something about it. But to be honest with you, my heart wasn't in it. And even he realized that at the end of the day, I had to, the university gave me a little letter at the end of my first year that said, we don't think that you've chosen the right course. Perhaps you might like to reconsider which course you're doing it and come back another time. And I thought, yeah, that's the signal. I really am not into engineering. I should just come out of it. And of course, been playing in a band at the university. That's where the link
Right.
came.
Yes.
I continued with that band when I left university, and then moved into film production. Yes, it was 16 millimeter film production.
Yes, God, that's quite interesting. So it was some interesting connections. So then, as the Stixies progressed on, then did you become quite intrigued with other kind of musical styles that were happening in the birth of kind of that San Francisco psychedelic scene, and people like Hendrix coming on, or were you still sort of very much in your own kind of world in Glasgow?
Well, I think that we were a dance band, and so we played every type of music. But I think what we really enjoyed most of all was certain rock and roll, but mostly vocals. I mean, things like the tremolos. We really listened to a lot of tremolos music, and their harmonies were superb. So we were trying very hard to emulate the harmonizing that was going on in the 60s. Most of the 60s pop bands were vocal groups.
Yes.
They definitely influenced us quite a bit. And that was good because we were a hybrid band. I mean, I find it really very difficult to sort of tie down what we found to be so important to musically speaking. And I think really basically it was just harmonies, melodies, and rhythm. And whatever came along that was popular at the time, we of course played at these supper dances because that's what people wanted to dance to and people wanted to listen to.
Yes.
So we followed the trend.
And Sally, when you became part of the outfit, did it all come together like the stars aligned, and it felt quite an exciting kind of new adventure? Oh, Sally?
Oh.
Sally, are you there? She might have gone to make a cup of tea, I think. I don't know.
You never know. Well, I mean, if I can speak for Sally until she comes back on again.
Sorry, Sally.
We definitely did find that we found the niche that we wanted to do, which was basically singing. I mean, we were guitar, bass, and drums. That was it, and we never really used massive amounts of amplification or instrumentation. And so we had to be quite particular with the singing side of things because we used our voices very much like instruments.
Yes.
And where there might have been brass riffs somewhere, we would do something like or whatever. It would be stabs from the voices, and I think that worked pretty well.
Yeah.
The pleasure we got was watching the people dance and listening to us. So they danced mostly. And if they were dancing well, then, lots of people on the dance floor, we knew we were hitting the target that they wanted.
Yes, absolutely. And Sally, are you there now, or have you still gone? I think she's gone home. No, she is at home, isn't she? So can you remember when... I think she must be still there. She is online, actually, but I don't know. Do you think she's gone to make a cup of tea?
I don't know. She doesn't do that sort of thing. When she's usually there to interrupt me, but I don't know why. I don't know where she's gone.
I think she's still on the line. Yeah. So can you remember the first time you went into a studio and what material? Had you been rehearsing and playing live much? I mean, were rehearsals quite a thing at that stage?
Yes, well, I mean, our rehearsals often took the part of actually performing sometime. We would do... In the early days, we would use a very broken down sort of X-flat type place, which was really going to be demolished. And this guy rented us out this room, which had 4 plugs in it, 3 of which were hanging out the wall. I mean, today you could never get away with it. The health and safety people would be down on top of it. But we were in this place, and it had no heating. It had plugs all over the place that were practically raw, but we just plugged in and we rehearsed about 2 or 3 times a week. But our main rehearsals were often actually the performances we did, because we listened to the recordings on our records or on the radio or whatever, and we were able to pick up the arrangements quite quickly. So that's the way that we really performed or rehearsed.
Yes. And what were with your set, was it very much kind of an organic process going from was it part 4 that you were in to begin?
Yeah, well, it was more a commercial process, I think. I mean, part 4 was the 4 of us singing in pubs, clubs, supper dances, etc. And then an agent decided to take us on, and he said, look, I've got 2 or 3 sort of special bands where they play specialist music. There's a Hawaiian band and there's a Trinidad steel band. He said, I'd like to make you into something like that. And we actually did 4 or 5 Latin American pieces, which went down extremely well. And he said, look, why don't we make you a Spanish-style group and call you Los Caracas?
Oh, blimey.
So, in fact, Los Caracas was born from the mouth of an agent. But it worked well. We dressed up in ponchos and Mexican hats. We did our 4 or 5 Latin American pieces, but most of the stuff was pop and the usual dance stuff that we did as part 4.
Yes.
But we were picked up on we did an audition for Thames Television for Opportunity Knocks as Los Caracas.
Right. And
completely forgot all about it. We thought, oh, well, right, fine. We've tried that. And it's 6 months later, after after we had a trial, sorry, I've lost my place a minute. Yes, 6 months after we had the audition, we were contacted by Thames Television, and they said, look, would you like to come down and do Opportunity Knocks?
Right.
So, oh yeah, why not? We could have a go at that. So down we went, and the first show, we did our famous Los Caracas type Spanish thing, and we won the first show. And so we had to go back for a second show with our second Latin American piece, and we won that. And then we went for a third time, and we were beginning to get a bit fed up, not doing anything other than our Latin American stuff, but we still did our third piece, and we only just lost. We just lost to, I can't remember who won that night, but we won twice. We were on 3 times, and then they invited us to do the all-winners show at Christmas time. So we had 4 appearances on national television, which did give us a big boost.
Yes.
For live performances, but nothing else. I mean, nobody came up and said, oh, we must sign you for a record contract.
No. Oh, so you didn't... So at that stage, you had no manager or anybody sort of...
Oh, no, we had an agent, this guy that had, put us into the Latin American style outfit, and he did very well. I mean, he was really mainly for live performances. But we wanted to do a little more. We were quite keen to do recording.
Yes. And were there any other bands around at that stage, or that point, in Scotland that you were quite, or even Britain, that you were quite close to in terms of, the same marketplace that you were going for, the same sound, or were you quite sort of on your own at this point? Because I was just thinking of various other bands that were starting to emerge during that late 60s and early 70s, and that kind of world of, pop that was very sort of different to the Beatles and Stones and Jimi Hendrix.
Yes, well, I mean, we knew 1 or 2 bands, but I think we were generally very much in a niche market of our own to a great extent. But we did, I mean, there were clubs in Glasgow that had bands like the Senate and the Alex Harvey Band. I mean, these were 2 very good rock and roll bands. The Senate in particular was a soul band, and in fact, I've still got one of their albums that I play quite regularly, and thoroughly enjoyed them.
Yes.
But we never met anybody much on our circuit, because it was such a... It was hotels, bars, supper dances, and private functions, things like that. So we were very much on our own to a great extent.
Yes, and I'm not sure if Sally's come back. Sally, are you there? No, she's gone. So I don't know if you've seen it recently, but I think it's on the iPlayer. There was this sort of 3-part series on boy bands and that kind of. Well, the thing that comes over, well, there's a few things, but one of it is the relentless commitments, like the 24/7 recording, touring, interviews, and just going through that process every day of the year for years until you can't make it. Were you already very, very sort of busy at this point?
Yeah, we were still, before we turned fully professional, we were doing 4 nights a week or so, usually Thursday, Friday, Saturday, occasionally Sunday, for these dances. And we could be, I had a job, as I say, in a film studio, and I used to have to drive home on a Sunday night from Newcastle or something like that, arrive at 7 o'clock in the morning in the office, and I had a very friendly boss who was quite keen that we got on quite well in our music. So he put up with a lot of moments when I actually fell asleep across tape recorders in the middle of the day. So we were busy singing and performing, but we also had our daytime jobs, and so it was, at that time, extremely difficult to find time to do any recordings.
Yeah. And were you...
Sorry.
No, after you.
Yeah, we did do one recording, which was, I think, written by Tom Springfield, and I've forgotten what it's called now, but it was in Glasgow we did it, and we were quite keen. We couldn't sell it to anybody because it was just a demo, and I've got a copy of that still, and it really sounds as though we're racing down a track somewhere, because the speed of it was about twice the speed it should have been, because I think the nerves were running at the time. So that was our very first recording together.
Yes, and did you, at that stage, were you struggling to either record or write material or find material to sing, or was that something that came kind of naturally? Because sometimes the stars line up and everything happens easily, and sometimes it's a bit of a struggle. Where were you on the sort of finding material?
We were just copying everybody else at the time, to be honest. We didn't write any of our own material. We performed songs that were popular for people for dancing, etc. So it was all done really basically by listening to other bands.
Yes, and then.
Well, that sounds very lazy, but it's not, because what we were doing was earning some extra money for ourselves at night and working during the day, and it was. I've always said this, that our trip into the music world was really, it was a hobby to us. And the hobby became something that took us over to some extent.
Yes.
And when we realised that, once we'd been to Opportunity Knocks and had success with Opportunity Knocks, we decided that, well, maybe there was something in the music side, and perhaps we should be a bit more serious about it. And it was then that we were taken up by a manager who wanted to take us abroad.
Right.
And maybe I'm jumping ahead too far. Are you?
Well, no, it's interesting, because so you had this kind of Italian connection, didn't you?
Well, we had Italian connection ultimately, but our first connection was with a manager who was actually an ex-Argentinian footballer, and a very well-known one at that. And he was working as a croupier in a casino where we were playing. And he got us together and said, look, I could take you over to Argentina, and we could, make quite a bit of money there and probably get worldwide attention. Now, I don't know how naive we were at the time, but I think we were very naive, to be honest, because we said, oh, that sounds interesting. And this guy put together a package with some people in Glasgow who invested in us and bought clothing, equipment, etc., and said, right, let's go abroad and we'll see if we can get some success. Because we weren't really getting anywhere further in the UK. We were doing very well with the working men's clubs in the north of England, etc., but that was about it. And it wasn't really what we were wanting to do. So we accepted the offer of all the equipment and the possibilities abroad, and we decided we would have to change our name, because we couldn't go as Los Caracas to Argentina, which would have been like taking coals to Newcastle. It was ridiculous. So we changed their name to Middle of the Road. I actually, we put down lists of names of bands that we might think would be suitable. And I put down Middle of the Road as one of mine. And I think everybody agreed that that was the sort of music that we were playing, in a sense. It was very middle of the roadish music.
Yes.
And it stuck. So we went abroad with him, and I'm going to cut a long story short because we could spend 3 days on this. We were taken to Italy. He turned out to be much more of a gambler than we ever thought. He had arranged auditions for us in Italy just as a sort of in-between point, as it were. And we passed this audition with an Italian agent who said, I can give you all sorts of work, which was very much like the work we were doing at home. It was in nightclubs, but they were very plush nightclubs. I mean, we were really getting pushed into areas where it was multimillionaires that were turning up for their dancing and all the rest of it. So that appealed to us, and we were doing quite well with that. And in the meantime, we found that our hotel bills were not being paid, and certain things were going wrong with money. And we found out that, I'm afraid, the manager we had was addicted to gambling.
Right.
He was gambling our money away, and we ended up with practically nothing. So we had to send him home, and the Italian agent took over. Now, he was part of a sort of musical collection of, how can I put it, composers and film music writers. Ennio Morricone was one of them. His name was, and there was one other one called Armando Trovaioli, who was very famous in Italy for writing theme songs for Italian films. And our agent now, it turns out, was also a musician, and he was connected with the two of them, and they set up a sort of studio circuit where they did all sorts of things for films in Italy. We didn't know anything about that at the time. I only learned that quite recently, actually. And he was pushing us into these nightclubs. And in one of the nightclubs in Forte dei Marmi, somebody from RCA Italiana in Rome came and said, would you like a recording contract because we think we could make something out of you? And we thought, well, okay, we're earning enough money here to pay back all the debts that our manager had accumulated for us, but it would be nice to have a recording contract. So, again, a long story short, we signed up with RCA, and they used us for film soundtracks as vocalists, but also they wanted to push an English singing group, that's the English language singing group, for international popularity, international commercialism. And they invited us in to do this Chirpy, Chirpy, Cheep, Cheep, which was already recorded by Lally Stott. He wrote it.
Yes.
And, but he couldn't get his record company to distribute it anywhere outside of Italy, apparently. So they brought it to us, and we were allocated a producer and 2 other writers who were musicians, and they took us into the studio and said, right, we're going to do this song. Well, I can tell you that the 3 boys were absolutely shattered by this, because we thought, this is it. Our reputation will be absolutely dashed if we were to sing something like ooey, chirpy, chirpy, cheep, cheep. So we had to be assisted with a little bit of alcohol to allow us to sing this, what we thought was a ridiculous song. Sally loved it. Sally thought it was terrifically commercial. She had a very good ear for commercial music, no question about it.
Yes.
But we were still very embarrassed at having to sing Chirpy Cheep Cheep.
Yes.
But at the end of the day, really, we were quite lucky in some respects, because RCA, the weekend we were recording the song, RCA were having all their representatives from all around the world having a sort of conference in Rome. And they brought down all their A&R men from the various countries to listen to the final mixes on Chirpy Cheep Cheep. And every single one of them took a copy away with them. They said, this is so commercial, we're going to go with this. And that sort of started it all off. I mean, it was quite remarkable. We were we were a little overwhelmed by it all because suddenly, instead of just doing live performances, we ended up doing television shows all over Europe, and then ultimately all over the world.
Yeah, and when you saw the lyrics of
Yes.
did you think, blimey, that's a weird song? And then, obviously there's a great beat to it, and it's obviously as catchy. But did you think this is rather bizarre?
Yes, we did at the time because we didn't really understand what we never actually asked Lally Stott, who wrote it, what the lyrics were all about, and I think we should have because it would have helped us a bit. But actually, it turns out again, it's amazing what you learn years later, but it turns out again that apparently a friend of his, two friends of his, the marriage was breaking up, and instead of the husband leaving, the wife left. And so he wrote this song, Where's Your Mama Gone? Little Baby Dawn. And as it turns out, Little Baby Dawn died only a few years ago just now, actually, because somebody, still don't know who this is, somebody got in touch with me on Facebook and told me that, the subject of Chirpy Cheep Cheep, Baby Dawn, died a few years ago.
Oh, wow.
And, something very sad about that because we would love to have known what the story was, and we might even have been able to meet Baby Dawn.
Maybe to Baby Dawn. I know it's all there. Really.
I don't think that was his name. I think it was another name altogether. But that seems to be the story behind Chirpy Cheep Cheep.
Yes, I would imagine. Blimey, there you go. So that suddenly hits all gold, doesn't it? And then you're on RCA, and then it's a case of getting the album out ASAP, isn't it?
Sorry, say that again.
I said you're on RCA Records at this stage, aren't you? And then it's a case of getting the first album out as soon as possible.
That's right, and that was another major problem because we had only recorded 3 or 4 songs when the album was supposed to be, which should have come out. But what they did was they added a couple of film soundtracks that we did, plus I think it was our 3 or 4 audition tapes, and they stuck that onto an Italian album and released that as our album. It was really very just stuck together like sellotape, but but it did stick and it did do quite well.
Yes.
But it was only after that they realised they needed to do something because singles were the thing. I mean, we were doing singles most of the time, but albums were picking up. It was the album charts were appearing all over the place because people were buying albums more than singles. So we had to start doing albums.
Yes. And did you, at that stage, was the band coping with that kind of amount of sudden fame? And, I mean, going from sort of doing these nightclubs or shows and various other bits and pieces, probably to, quite a sort of an audience that probably weren't screaming mad and thousands of them to suddenly this worldwide fame and whizzing around Europe and having number ones, which are a number one song which is there for sort of about 4 weeks. How did the band cope with that dynamically?
Well, I think pretty well, to be honest with you, because we never had any sort of ambitions to do what we were actually doing. And so when it all happened, it was a little bit like a surprise and a sort of like winning the pool sometime or the premium bonds. And we thoroughly enjoyed doing television because at that time, most of the work that was done with pop was done to playback. So we were just miming. I mean, you go on and do Chirpy Cheep Cheep, which we could do live, but unfortunately, TV stations at that time were rushing through their programs. They didn't have time to have 2 or 3 days of rehearsals or getting the mixes right and all the rest of it. So they stuck, and that included Top of the Pops, I may say, which at the beginning insisted that we actually recorded it live and then played it. We did the playback later, but that was quite often sort of changed to the actual master from the 45 RPM. Perhaps I shouldn't say that, but it's so many years ago now, I think people know that was going on. But it was not the bands that were doing the playback. It was the TV stations. They didn't have time to set up the microphones and all the rest of it. At that time, they didn't take the time to do it. And so it was quite easy for us. At the end of the day, we were singing away. We were getting exposed on television. We got interviews on radio. And none of that really affected us that much. To be honest, the Middle of the Road was very much a democratic band in its own rights. We did all work together very well. And none of us really had any sort of stardom type thoughts. We just thought we were just doing a job. We got paid for it. Not a lot of the time. I may say one or two people I would like to punch in the nose. But on the other hand, we enjoyed it, and we were well looked after. I mean, RC Italiana was a major. They had a major recording studio in Rome, which was doing all the soundtracks for films, etc. And they really looked after us pretty well. But they didn't look after us terribly well with the contract. Well, I'll not go into that.
No, well, that's always the thing, isn't it? Really, the dreaded contract. Yes, I know. Yeah. Everyone's got stuff. So, was the sort of follow-up album then from the self-titled album? Was that Acceleration, and then?
No, the first album we did was called just Middle of the Road.
Yes, and
it came out on RCA here as well. I think it was certainly out in Italy first. And then it came out here. But yes, Acceleration was our first serious album.
Right, so that was the next one, and that had the material on it, was that also mostly written or all written by other people at this stage?
Yes, well, we were part of what could be described as a 60s era, where lots of people wrote songs and the artists performed them. And we never really wrote any of our material on the RCA recordings at all. There were one or two tracks, I think, on the albums where we were allowed to do something, but we were not experienced in writing music. We were not experienced in we never went anywhere to try and deliberately write a song. I think we wrote one song in a car. We were coming back from a photo session one time, and it was a taxi, and the four of us were sitting there, and we wrote a song then, but we weren't that interested in writing songs. We were getting really good material from the people that we were working with in RCA. Our producer, Giacomo Tosti, and two brothers, Mario and Jose Capuano, they were responsible for getting the material for us and also for writing the material. And the Capuano brothers were really very talented and had very, very good commercial material going. And they wrote a lot of the music and got some other people, including ourselves, to write some lyrics. And so that the main source of material musically was coming from these people, but they would pull in other people to write the lyrics, because obviously their English was good, but not good enough necessarily to come up with the right sort of lyrics for the songs.
Yes.
One of the songs, what used to happen was that Jose Capuano used to sing the song, but he didn't speak English at all. So he would sing in a sort of, not even a language. It was just sounds from his voice. And he would do that, put that down on tape. And then they handed one of his tracks to us and said, could you write lyrics for this? Now, some of his phonetics were very, very close to what we could write as lyrics. And they sort of suggested things to us all the way along. And finally, we did write one song, I think called Give It Time, which I actually wrote the lyrics for, but Sally gets credited with.
Right.
There's a story for you.
That's a whole other story, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, have you got 3 days? I can certainly carry on if you want.
Yes. Well, what was that? What was that particular song?
Well, the song was the B-side. It was the B-side of Tweedledee Tweedledum.
Right.
And we actually the reason why Sally was given the rights on that one was because in Italy at that time, if any musician wanted to earn money from their writing, whether it was music or lyrics, they had to be a member of SAI, which was something like MCPS, the Italian version of MCPS. And to get into that as a member, you had to pass a music exam or a lyrics exam.
Right.
Now, the other three people, Ian, Eric, and Sally, all sat the lyrics exam, but I was pushed in to sitting the music exam. Now, because I was sitting the music exam, I didn't sit the lyrics exam. I failed the music exam, which I thought was really quite nasty.
Yes.
I think what I wrote was all right, but I don't think they liked it. And the other three of them were able to join SAI or get recognition for writing lyrics and therefore earn money from it. So this democratic group that we were, we decided that, it didn't matter who wrote it, we would just all share the money anyway.
Yes.
So that's how that happened, and Sally gets credit for writing "Give It Time."
Yeah.
But I mean, she's very open about it. She knows that she didn't write that, and she's often saying, "No, that was Ken. He wrote it." So that's fine, but we still don't get any money for it, as far as I can see.
No, this is. So you're very prolific at this stage. I mean, you're bringing out albums every year, if not nearly two a year. You do, you follow that accelerator up with Drive On. Then you got music, Postcard. Yeah, I mean, there's no slowing down at this point during the 70s. So are they, is it all hands on deck? And
yes. Yes, it's interesting. You've moved into the Areola days with these postcard, music, dice, etc. That's when we did start to write our own stuff and to produce our own stuff, because RCA didn't renew our contract after 3 years. They decided that that was it. The middle of the road had done well for them and still doing well for them. Yes. In some respects, but they didn't want to renew the contract. So by this time we had new management in London, and they were desperately trying to find another record company that might be interested. And of course, we didn't have any material to sell to them at that time, but what we did have was an element of, there were some royalties coming in, so we decided that we would start recording our own material and see where we went from there. Fortunately, the management managed to get a recording contract with Areola, which was a German record label, but it was a very limited distribution. It was mainly Europe and South Africa. That was it. And so we got nothing in the UK, nothing in the United States, nothing anywhere outside of Europe or South Africa. So we recorded these songs, 6 albums, I think it was, of our own material, and we put a lot of money into it. We got orchestral arrangements. We had quite a lot of interesting people that came along to play with us on these recordings. And Areola took them. There were 2 or 3 hits in Europe with some of the songs, and then that was it, finished. It seemed to disappear after that. Areola were bought over by BMG. Right. BMG was bought over by Sony, and the whole thing became a mess. And these albums just got left on the shelf to a great extent. So yes. I liked them. I mean, whether they were, I don't think they were that commercial. I think that's what the main problem was. But I liked them as a group. We developed really well, I think, and we still had the harmonies and the sound that we had with RCA, but we were doing our own material now. And some of it, I think, was lost at the time, and it's only now coming out again because of the record company that we now have in the States, who's very keen on them and is pushing them as hard as possible. But it's still difficult. It's very difficult to sell albums if the group isn't touring. Yes. And we're not touring. I mean, to be honest with you now, well, our bass guitarist died some years ago. Our rhythm guitarist formed another band about 30 years ago. And Sally and I are the only ones that really kept the original sound going. But now just before the pandemic, we stopped touring. And to be honest with you, the 4 years have taken their toll to some extent. Sally doesn't have the voice she has. She knows that. And we're not as fit as we were. No. Although I must admit, both of us miss performing. I mean, it really is quite sad. But in not performing, we obviously, selling the albums has to be done on the internet, basically. That's the way it goes now.
Yes, because during that 70s, mid-70s, Neil Henderson, he leaves No, he joined the band. So did you have a kind of a lineup change during that sort of 74, 75 period? So Neil joined the band on guitar, didn't he?
That's right. Yes, Neil Henderson from the Bay City Rollers decided he wanted to join us, and he did. And for the years that we were recording for Areola, he was with us. He wrote a lot of the songs, all the material as well. And we stayed that way right till 1976, I think it was. And then Sally left the band.
Did you know with Sally leaving in 77, did you know that was on the cards? Had you picked up that she was just needing a change or a different path in life?
Yeah, no, we didn't. Well, I suppose we did to some extent because we were all a bit disconcerted. We were all finding it all quite hard to actually get anywhere because the record company, RCA, was a major part in our success, I have to say, because they really did promote us absolutely everywhere, where Areola didn't have that power. So we were losing some sort of impact, and to be honest with you, we could feel that the career was sliding a bit. But we did want to, at least if we were going to go out, we did want to go out with material and stuff that was the band. I mean, these 6 albums are middle of the road.
Yes.
And the previous ones are RCA's version of middle of the road, which was very successful. I mean, there's no question. I'm not going to deny that, and I certainly don't regret it. But we did want to do a lot more. I mean, there were bands like the Sweet, who were also very light pop at the beginning, and then they moved off into glam rock and all the rest of it. Well, of course, we couldn't move into glam rock because we had a female singer, and it wouldn't have been suitable at all.
No. And what was it like having because Linda takes over on the mic at this stage, doesn't she? 77, and sung on Something Old, Something New album from 81. Was that strange not having Sally there, sort of, in front of you on the stage?
Yeah. Well, it must have been, but I actually left before that actually happened. Because I could see that things were not going to go the same route, and I was finding a different career again at that time. I'd moved back into video production this time, and I had my own company, and I thought, no, I think, I've been through it all, we've had a success, that's fine, off I go to something else.
Yes.
And so I left in 1977, I think it was.
Oh, God.
But I didn't. I wasn't involved in the recording of the Something Old, Something New album. So
yes.
That was Ian and Eric did that.
Yeah. And so, what's the story of the band during the 80s, and then when you get the baton
Got back together.
Yes.
Yes. Well, the Ian and Eric continued with Linda lasted for so long, and then she left, and they had a number of singers. Well, one singer in particular whom they toured with, and that became very much a family exercise because she married, I think, Eric, and there was all sorts of things going on there. But it was a musical unit, which was still called Middle of the Road. And they still did Chirpy Cheep Cheep, and they still did all the songs that we were well known for. And that worked up to a point. But whenever they wanted to do any television, whenever television wanted Middle of the Road, they had to pull the older band back together again. And Sally and I were quite happy to do that. But, again, it was playback.
Yes.
And we would go into the studio, and it was Middle of the Road as they were. The others did do television performances by themselves, but I think a lot of the major stations really wanted to use the old band, the original band. But that didn't pull Sally and I back in at all. We did a sort of recording on the Stars on 45 thing at one time.
Yes.
Which was, we did a medley for them with the original band. But no, we didn't really want to get back in. It was very much later on, when things were slowing down even for the band that were continuing in the 80s, the things were not going the way that they wanted it either. And it was then that I think it was either Ian or Eric phoned up Sally and asked her to come back if she could sing, because she hadn't been singing for 10 or 15 years. And she said, well, I'm only coming back if Ken comes back.
Right.
So on the basis of that, we all got back together. And yes, it clicked again. And it was something which we didn't expect. We were quite thrilled by it. Once again, it was back to enjoy the performances, see people enjoying themselves and sing along with you and all the rest of it. And that worked. That really went very well.
Yes.
For 2 years.
So was that kind of 2017?
No. This was 1991.
Oh, right. So that's when.
Yeah.
So that's when you got. Oh, right. So 91, the John Major years. Yes, the band. So basically the 80s, the band was quite different, and then you and Sally are back in it.
That's right. And it worked really well. Our first major live performance was done to a 16,000 audience on live television on a show which the Europeans did from Holland, and it was massive. They had, there was Jerry and the Pacemakers. There were lots of artists whose names completely go out of my mind at the moment. But it was a massive show, and we did 6 songs on it, and the audience went mad, because they had not seen us for 15 years, the original band. And it was such a success that we decided that it might be a good idea to get back together if there were live performances and we could tour.
Yes.
And and it turned out that a German agent saw all this, and he had been booking the other band before, but when he heard that the original band had got back together again, he went, listen, we've got tours in Germany we could do. They were called oldie nights, and they had all sorts of acts on. There were maybe 6 or 7 of the 60s acts, 70s acts, and these were massive. They went down a storm. And so we joined that particular circuit, and that worked really well for 2 years.
Yes. Did you find that there was a kind of enjoyment of nostalgia? Because I found that mostly I've done a lot of bands from the 80s, which is kind of my decade. But after they had that kind of 5-year period, of touring albums, and then sort of realising that they're not particularly fond of each other and they made no money. They all go their separate ways. And also what a lot of those bands found was that actually people were also, the fans were moving on. They were like getting jobs. They were having other commitments. They were getting homes. They weren't, to be honest, a lot of fans, and I'm guilty of this, is like you almost think, well, I've got 2 albums or 3 albums by that band, and this album sounds the same as the other 2, but not quite so good. Then, so you feel a bit like Judas in a way, and then you realise that they put an album out, and the press aren't that interested, the fans aren't that interested, and they think, oh, I'm not going to go and play those small venues that we started at anymore. And like I said, money is also never really been forthcoming. So they stop then, and then they pick it up about 20 or 30 years later when people are a bit like, actually, you were great and we really miss you. Did you find that with Middle of the Road?
Yes, we did. It was really quite amazing, because we'd never ever expected that. I mean, even today, here we are today. There's somebody phoned me up on the this morning to say that they had walked into a charity shop and the music that was playing was Chirpy Cheap Sheep. And I thought, well, I suppose the charity shop's the right place to be for that at the moment. But I have to say that the nostalgia aspect of music kicked in definitely in the 90s. There's no question about that, because these circuits that we were doing in Germany mainly, but also Holland, Belgium, and occasionally France and Denmark, they were highly successful, and it was older people, but they were bringing their children along.
Oh yes,
and so it was family events, and they were so successful that they continued on, and are still continuing to some extent now, but not the same as before, because obviously Brexit and all sorts of other issues have cropped up, and it's not so lucrative for agents over there or agents in Europe and in Britain to actually send people over there. It's much more difficult now.
Yes.
That's what I believe, but maybe I'm wrong on that. I don't know. But I know that the success of nostalgia is huge. It's definitely a very big aspect of the music side when you look back on things now. People are always saying, oh, I remember what I was doing when I heard that. I know that was the first record I bought. And, oh, you know, it's nostalgia that's carrying some of these old songs. But having said that, the music was good.
Yes, no,
So
it's
about it. The music was really good then, and it's you know, it's a personal thing. People will remember what they want to remember and like what they want to like, and that's the way it should be.
Well, absolutely. And when you look at your back catalogue, is there any particular tracks or albums that you have most fondness or think that was a, you know, when you hear back now, do you think that's the high, one of your personal high points?
Yeah, I would say, well, practically all the RCA albums were high points because they were very well produced, very popular. But of the other albums, one that I like particularly is Postcard, which has got a really wide range of material on it. It's got from rock and roll to country and western, and also obviously lots of harmonies and melodies and things. And that's one of my favourite albums. And to be honest with you, with the albums that we did with Areola were in an order like Music. It was then You Pays Your Money, You Takes Your Chance, and then Postcard, Dice, and Black Gold. And they developed. If you listen to these albums in that order, you'll find that there's a development that takes place. The band is evolving with its music and evolving with its recordings, and I think that the Postcard one was the one that demonstrates best what Middle of the Road is about.
That's interesting, isn't it? Yeah, no, it's got, because that by then you'd have done about 5 or 6 albums, hadn't you? By Postcard, actually, that was your mid 70s album. So
That's right, yeah.
It's incredible. So is it the case then that you and Sally are the people who are keeping the legacy, you know, the website and just directing the reissues and stuff at the moment, or are there other members?
No, it's just Sally and I, because I'm a bit of an archivist, to be honest with you. I've filmed practically everything. If we moved anywhere in the 70s or 80s or 70s or 90s, then I filmed it, and I've got lots of material. And in fact, I produced with my wife, I produced a sort of retrospective program on Middle of the Road with Sally and I chatting about things in the past, and it covers a lot of the story of Middle of the Road, the nice part of it. There's no nasty things underneath it at all. It's Middle of the Road as they saw it, as they went along, and it's a really nice thing. But from the point of view of the music, the albums, I have all the master tracks here at home, and I've used them for the new recordings, which we sent over to the States, and they remastered them, and they sound even better than they were way back in the 70s. But I have got lots of material, lots of photographs, and Sally has the same, and we've kept that, and the magazines, storylines. I mean, I'm in the middle at the moment of sort of writing a sort of memoir to some extent, just to go over what Middle of the Road was about and where we ended up at the end of the day. Sally and I are very much in favour of the original band. I mean, you can change members in bands, etc., and they develop and do different things. That's fine. But Middle of the Road, I don't think, does that. I think Middle of the Road is what they were. That's Sally, myself, Ian, Eric, and ultimately Neil. The 5 of us together produced what was Middle of the Road, and there's nothing else after that is Middle of the Road. I mean, I've listened to the recordings that the new band made and all the rest of it, and in the 80s, and they were good. And there's no question. It was all good material, and they all sang well, and they all performed well. But there was a magic with our voices, the 4 of us together. Neil didn't sing that much. He did more of the guitar work and write the music. But the 4 of us singing together, I believe, was Middle of the Road, and you can't replicate that.
No, absolutely. God, that's amazing. It's brilliant. To be honest, I love the archiving world. So hurrah for because actually that material that you've got in your cupboards and boxes is just it's great that you've got it, and hopefully you'll be able to put it into some very nice kind of order and box set and a film. So is this film that you made, because I did look on the internet but I didn't see anything. I've seen videos and lots of bits and pieces but nothing like a film of the band. Is that anywhere available or is that still
well yes, it's been produced. I mean, we actually made it in 2017, I think it was. Oh no, it was 2007. Good heavens, way back then. But the problem with it is this: I took it to down south to London, finished, to some people down there who were interested in the band, and they said, "Oh, is this a documentary? Do you have Tony Blackburn in it? Do you have all the people and all this sort of thing?" And I said, "No, this is Sally and I talking about the band."
Mm.
Oh, right. Oh well, no, I don't think that's what we want. So we couldn't get it through London anyway, but we went to Germany and did all these tours and things. And the German Sony, I think it was ultimately, said, "Yeah, well, we'd like to release that on a DVD." So they said, "But we need to clear it with London because they're the people that make the final decisions." So they went to London, and London said no. So I've got a 1-hour sort of documentary, which is finished, but I can't release it because it's got so much copyright in it all over the place that trying to work out who's who and who owns what is actually quite difficult. Although it's all cleared. I mean, I've been in touch with Sony, I've been in touch with all sorts of people, and they've said, yes, you've got material and you can use it, but let us know when you get a deal. So I haven't got a deal.
Yeah, God, it's a catch-22, isn't it? Yes, it's well. Hopefully, we'll see the light of day very soon because we love our rock documentaries that seem to be coming out quite prolifically, and they're always amazing to sort of hear the story of a band. I mean, whatever decade and whatever genre of music, they're always slightly similar, but still fascinating, really. And I think every band can sort of probably relate to each other's experience, and it's amazing. So so at the moment, it's kind of a case of just working on these releases in America. And hopefully one day getting this film, and also the memoir, the book. Is that also something that you're feeling needs to be done before too long?
Yes. Well, I mean, I'm sort of still working. I started it about a year and a half ago or something, and it's going to take a little bit of time to sort out. But yes, I intend to have it finished. I've not got any publisher yet. I'm not approaching a publisher just at the moment. But once I've got the whole thing sort of more established, more edited and down to what we think it should be, then I may approach somebody with it. But my son is very interested. He says, it was he who got me started, actually. He said, "Look, I want to know all about everything."
Yes.
And I said, "Do you really want to know about it?" He said, yeah, just put it, can we have a talk? Will you write something down? I said, yeah, okay, I'll do that. So that's how that started. But whether that sees the light of day is another matter. But it is definitely, it goes into greater detail than even we've gone into at the moment.
Oh,
and there's
exciting.
nothing in it. There is nothing in it that is nasty. I mean, there's all sorts of things happen with bands. And yes, we had nasty moments. We had difficulties with each other and all the rest of it. But really, that doesn't matter. But it is. The problem is that that's the sort of thing that sells, I'm afraid. If you say something about somebody, I want to know more about that. But we were great friends. We were actually like a family working together, and that's what I like to think of Middle of the Road. It was a group, very democratic, very friendly, and we just got on well together. That was it. Ultimately, of course, there were issues, and that was it. But
well, that's it. And Sally, who can't unfortunately be here, but she had a brain hemorrhage, didn't she, and then sort of a stroke. So she's recovered from that and is feeling better.
She's recovered she had a brain hemorrhage and was recovering from that. And a year later, she had, I've forgotten what it is. Stuck a camera up inside her to check what was going on and if her brain was all right. And the chances on that, doing that, were something like 1 in 5,000 people take a stroke.
Right.
Well, believe it or not, Sally was one of those 1 in 5,000, and she took a stroke. So she had a brain hemorrhage, followed a year later by a stroke, and she has made the most remarkable recovery. She's got problems. We all have problems. I mean, there's no way that we don't have problems.
Oh yes, that's life.
But she is the most amazing person. She faces up to things with such determination that I just look up to her on that, because I couldn't go through what she's gone through and still be where she is now.
Yes, well,
which is a good question actually. Where is she?
Where is she? This is the mystery. The mystery. Well, I hope she's all right. Actually, I mean, she probably thought.
Yeah.
Anyway, look. Ken, this has been amazing. Well, look, I've never done a three-way conversation by phone before. I've done it on Zoom, I've done it on Skype. So I was thinking, right, there's no chance of being able to rehearse it beforehand. So I'm amazed and pleased it's all happened, actually. And well, thank you ever so much for your time. And this has been incredible. And like I said, when I said about my musical influences at the very start, obviously Middle of the Road were very much there on the radio, on Top of the Pops, and on my formative years. So, I mean, that's where, one becomes a little bit kind of, yes, that band. And I don't think you'll probably know this, but in 1989, there was a compilation record that came out. It was an anti-poll tax album, which was titled Elvin Lives in Leeds, and a lot of bands from the 80s indie punk world copied songs from the 70s, and there's a great version of Chirpy Chirpy Cheep Cheep by a band called Lush. And have you ever heard it, by the way?
No, I haven't.
Well, it's done exactly like the band, but I'll send you a little link, because it is a little bit a classic, and like I said, it appeared on this anti-poll tax league, and all these old punks and anarchists would have heard these versions that were all in our childhood memories, and I think that's probably why they recorded them. But it's quite a nice version, so hopefully you can have a little listen and send it to Sally as well.
Yeah, I would like that. Yeah, I would like that.
And I noticed that Spotify, you've got over nearly 380,000 listens a month, which obviously is nice to know that people are still tuning into the music.
Yes, Spotify is a bit of an issue at the moment because they've got the wrong photograph up. They've got the photograph of the other band, and all the recordings that are being noticed are all the original band recordings. And I've already complained to Spotify, and they haven't actually done anything yet. But they said they were looking into it. But it's the wrong photograph that's on Spotify.
I said with the so with that kind of interview that we were doing yesterday, I got up to the point where we were just talking a little bit about that kind of period of the kind of 60s, where you'd gone from school to hairdressing, hadn't you? And then you were just
right.
And so from there, when you were a hairdresser, then were you working then? Like singing, just in a sort of like a casual way before.
I was still singing in pubs and clubs and things around Glasgow, and it was quite difficult actually. But I've always been a very fit person, and I was the only person that worked on a Saturday. The boys didn't work on a Saturday. So after we'd done a late night gig on a Friday night, which could have been up in Fort William, up in the north of Scotland or something, I wouldn't get very much sleep before I had to be back at work the next morning. But I coped with it. I mean, I was a grafter.
Yes.
My father used to say to me, "You're burning the candle at both ends, girl. And one day, the two flames will meet and you'll just go boom."
Yes, it's surprising what youth can do, though, when it comes to energy.
When you're young, and you have that will, I find nowadays so many young people are not really interested in working.
No, absolutely. Or they're a bit fragile. But then, how did that kind of transition go from your singing casually, working in the kind of hairdressers? Then how did you meet the boys? Because they weren't called Middle of the Road at that point, were they?
No, they were called. I used to sing in clubs and pubs and things. They were called Part 4, and they were called Karen and the Sophisticats. That's what it was. And they worked in a pub not far from where I lived. And believe it or not, I wanted to go to America for a year because I had friends live in America and I wanted to go over and visit them and see what it was like. And you never know what would have happened, but I would never have moved to America because I'm Scottish through and through, and that's it. I just love my country and I love my heritage. So anyway, I was looking for extra work, and I heard about this band who were looking for a girl to dep for the girl singer they had. She was going into hospital for a few months. So I went along and I said to them, I'd be interested. So after that, Ken and I think it was the guitarist in the band then from Carr and the Sophisticats, I went along to get a wee sort of interview with them in a place in Glasgow. I think it was in the guy's flat, not Ken's flat, the other guy. And I sang a lot of songs, and Ken said yeah. I think one of them both said yeah. Would you like to join us for this?
Yes.
It was going to be 3 months, 6 months, or whatever. So I did, and we gelled so well. Our voices gelled so well. And when it came the time when Karen came back, Ken and Ian and Eric said they didn't want to have Karen back again. They would rather have me. So we split from them then.
Yes.
And we became Part 4.
Right, so that's the beginning of that next adventure. And at that stage, were you just covering, were you just doing cover numbers, or were they writing material?
Yeah, all cover songs from right across the board, all kinds of artists.
Yes, that's amazing. So then,
Not just pop, different kinds of music.
and did your, with that lineup with Ken and Eric, did that all just gel? Did the stars line up beautifully, and it sort of felt like you had known each other for years?
It was just, we gelled musically. I'm not saying we didn't gel as people, but musically our voices complemented each other. And it just became a very good working relationship. And then, now how did we go from there?
So did the band change then from Part 4 to this other interest in Latin, to the Latin American name of?
That's right, Los Caracas.
Yes.
And we dressed up in Latin American costumes because we knew that, we'd heard that if you have a certain theme, you could get more money for the gig. So doing the Latin, we just had a few Latin American songs, and then we just had the other across the board songs. And we went out that way. And then we were working in a casino in Glasgow called the Chevalier. And 2 guys in the Chevalier who were croupiers wanted to take us to South America.
Right.
And, that's a big decision. And we thought about it and we said, right, okay, so we went with Oscar, went along with what Oscar was saying, and we headed off, supposed to be for South America, Argentina. But then, when we got to Italy, we had to stop in Italy to do some gigs to get more money for the rest of the journey, the rest of the trip. And they had a guy, a friend, who was a football manager, and he was going to help to get us to South America. Anyway, we were supposed to meet him in Italy, which we did, and I'm just trying to think from there. We met him, and then we did more work with Oscar as the manager.
Right.
And then we found out he was taking on. We were in Rome. We ended up in Rome, and we were doing well, working in this Helio Cabala bar restaurant place,
Yes.
which was very exclusive. And we met quite a few different artists there. The Helio Cabala was just up the hill from Sophia Loren's mansion.
Nice.
That's how upmarket it was.
Yeah.
And one day I went to the cafe to get something, to the bar or something. It was just a bottle of water. And the manageress said, "When are you going to pay your bill?" I said, "Oscar's paid the bill." She says, "He hasn't paid anything for months or weeks or whatever it was." I said, "You're joking." So I went back and told the boys. I said, "Oscar's not paying the bill." So Ken and I set out to try and discover what was going on. We did find out he was fiddling the money. He brought his wife and child across to Italy, and then he left, abandoned them. Maybe you shouldn't write that, though.
Yes.
That's not. We could maybe get sued for saying that.
Yeah.
Maybe you shouldn't say that. He brought his wife and child over to Italy, and then he took off. Anyway, you're really taxing my brain here.
Yes. So it was very...
From there, we had to move out of the Helio Cabala because obviously we couldn't afford it, and we moved into a campsite. And we stayed in the campsite, but still continued doing the gigs in around Rome. And then we were doing sessions in RCA in Rome. And one day this guy, David Eastaugh, came in, and I was singing with Sophia Loren, dubbing my voice for Sophia Loren for one of her Italian films. And he heard me singing, and he said, "That's the voice for Chirpy." This is what he told me.
Yes.
And he'd already recorded Chirpy, and so had another couple called Mac and Kate Christoon. They'd recorded Chirpy also, but done nothing. So we decided, yeah, we'll record it. And we signed an Italian contract, all in Italian. We didn't speak a word of it in Italian. In all honesty, we didn't really know what we were signing, but we did sign it. And we started working for RCA and doing all the different session work for different singers. I used to dub my voice for the Italian actresses who had to sing in their films.
Right.
And it was from there that it took off.
Yes. So you'd gone on to Opportunity Knocks and had won...
That's right. That was before Part 4.
Yeah.
That was Los Caracas.
Yeah.
That was after Part 4. That was Los Caracas. Opportunity Knocks with Huey Green. And we did that for, I think we won it 4 weeks in a row or something. something. I can't remember exactly how many weeks we won it, and get called back. And then in the All Winners show, it was a pianist who won the All Winners show. Yeah, we did Up Knox as well.
So when you first heard Chirpy, did you think this
I loved it, and I still love it.
Excellent. You knew it was going to be a hit? Because it's...
God, I knew. Listen, I was your most reluctant pop star in the world. I didn't want fame. I just loved singing.
Yes.
And that was it. But I loved Chirpy, but the boys hated it. And they said, there's only one way we'll sing that, and I'm going to say a rude word here, is if we're pissed.
Right.
So, Mario Capuano and Giacomo Tosti. Giacomo was the producer. Giacomo says, right, we'll get you pushed. So we went in and recorded it, and it became a massive hit all over Europe immediately. But Britain rejected it a bit.
Yes.
Very much so, actually, and it was only when Young Blood Records, I think it was, from America, contacted RCA in Britain and said, we would like to take over the rights to release Chirpy in America. And RCA wouldn't allow them. And then I think they probably blew the dust off the record and thought, we'll give it another try. So they released it again, and it shot right into number one so fast in Britain that we were actually, what's the word? This is my brain hemorrhage that causes this. We were actually investigated for payola.
Oh, right.
Yeah, they thought it had been bought in, but it hadn't been bought in. It just soared. And it was Tony Blackburn who brought it back from Europe.
Yes.
And he came off the plane with us and he said, this is brilliant. And he played it on his, I don't know what the show was called, that's what I have forgotten.
Yes.
On his show on the radio. He played it on the, and well, the rest is history, basically.
Yeah. But then it's it's amazing you hit number one on your first record. Then obviously you've got to get the album out and touring at the same time. But then that next period, because you're with RCA at this point, you've released in kind of almost an album a year, aren't you? For quite a few.
That I don't remember. I don't remember how we released it.
Yeah. Did you, when the band obviously took off in the 70s and you were there until 77, kind of you obviously released a lot of albums. What was that kind of period like? You know, was it just literally a bit like one of these bands that when the members talk about it, they just mention, well, we didn't do anything apart from, it was just the band, it was recording, touring, you know.
Yeah, we toured and we recorded. We were in and out of the studios recording. But from that, we got a lot more European coverage.
Yes.
And the rest of the world coverage, which was quite amazing. And because of that, we got to travel the world. We've worked everywhere, you name it. Japan, South America, North America, Bangkok. I can't remember all the places.
Did you go to Australia at all?
We never got to Australia or New Zealand, and the reason for that was we were actually booked to go to Australia. But the band who went in front of us, the tour that was done before us, I don't remember the name of the band. They were quite bad in the way that they broke up a piano.
Right.
They were angry people. That's not the word either.
No, obviously not.
because of my brain problems.
Yeah. So because up to, the first few albums were on RCA, then you went to, is it?
Areola?
Areola, yes, for the album, which was Music, and then you had Postcard. During that period, did you sort of keep the love of the band together at that point? Were you still enjoying it
We're still all together and enjoying the work, and it was hard work, though. I have to say, it was hard work.
Yes.
We travelled a lot, and, well, here's an example. There was one day we were recording in Rome, and we had another 2 things lined up in another 2 countries. So we left Rome early in the morning, finished off a recording we were doing, hightailed it to Leonardo da Vinci Airport, where we boarded a plane and went to Greece. And I think it was Greece, yeah. And it might not have been Greece, but I think it was. And there, we went in there and did a live 30-minute set, which was being recorded. We didn't have a chance to change out of our travelling clothes. We just went in and did it with what we were travelling in. And then from there, we went back to the airport. This is only one day. Back to the airport. You couldn't do it now. Back to the airport again and flew out to Tel Aviv in Israel, where we did a press conference for masses of press at midnight.
Yes, you must have been absolutely shattered.
Completely.
But kept it going, which was just extraordinary, really. When you were doing those last couple of albums, because in '77 this is when you leave the band, isn't it? When you were recording, because you did on Areola, you did music, then Postcard, You Pays Your Money, and You Take Your Chance, Dice, and then Black Gold. Were you on the album? Were you still singing with the band at Black Gold?
Yeah. Yeah, we were all still together.
Yes. And how were you feeling at that stage? Were you sort of, when you were recording that album, did you feel like this was going to be possibly the last one before you left?
I left because my mum died.
Right.
My mum died. My mum was an invalid for many years. And she died. And I just could not sing chirpy again, saying, "Where's your mama gone?" And even to this day, when I think about it, and every time I tried to sing it, I broke down and cried. And then, in the interim, I got married, and I had a child of my own.
Yes.
But we still kept working. But it was when my mum died, I couldn't do it anymore. I had to stop. I gave up.
Yeah.
And that was it. It was very difficult for me.
Yeah. So you married, was it Chick Young, and had your son Keith at this point in 1980?
Done your homework, yes, that's right.
Yeah. So by that stage, had you given up music altogether and just, settled into family life?
Yeah, well, I gave up music before I got married, and then because all I ever wanted out of life was to be married, have children, and just have a happy family life like my mum and dad, and like what I grew up in. I never wanted to be a pop star.
No, absolutely.
I found it very difficult.
Yes. So when did you have you were just mentioning right at the beginning, when did you have your trip, and then the problem with your brain, I guess?
The craniotomy?
Yes.
Was 2012.
2012. My
yeah,
God.
2012.
Yeah, but then, so many things. So at that stage, because Yeah, you're sort of... You had a lot of personal stuff, didn't you? Because Keith gets also killed in a motorcycle accident, which is horrendous.
That's right. He was in the pillion of his friend's motorbike. It was actually Keith's motorbike and his friend was driving it. And Keith was never interested in alcohol or anything. He was more interested in driving. And he had an old car that he was doing up, and he was putting it into the garage. There was something that he couldn't do, and he was putting it into a garage in the next village to where we live. And normally if he was doing things like that, I would follow him and bring him back in my car.
Yes.
This morning, it's almost as if he knew but didn't know that he wasn't coming back, because I just heard the door opening downstairs. And I looked downstairs and I said, "Where are you going?" And he says, "I'll be back." And that was it. And then the next thing, he was away to put his car in. And the next time I saw him, he was in a body bag.
Jeez, so crazy. My God. So he got killed on the road?
Yeah. It's a road that I go up a lot. Well, I go up most of the time. It's the next village, and I have to use it to go up to the cemetery, to go up to... I've got friends up there. My church is up there. And I had a terrible feeling that day myself. They say that the umbilical cord is never cut, and I believe that. And a couple of his friends had phoned as well, and seemingly the school bus was sitting. All the kids in the bus saw the accident happen.
My God.
Because the school bus was sitting, waiting to go up towards the next village that Keith had just come down from. And from behind the trees, bushes, this big 4x4 pulled out, and the young man didn't have a chance. He didn't stand a chance. The young man who was driving, and Keith was in the pillion and was chucked right over the top and died on the road.
Jesus. Yeah, Jesus. Yeah, that must have been horrendous. Yeah, crikey. How old was he?
It's a hard one to get your head round.
Yes, because actually I think the guy who sort of wrote Chirpy was also killed in a motorcycle accident as well, wasn't he?
A year later, he was killed as well, David Eastaugh, that's right.
Mm.
But it wasn't a motorbike, it was a car. Because he became very, very rich after Chirpy.
Yes.
And it was one of these very, I don't know what you call Lamborghinis or something that he was driving in. I don't know what it was called, but it was one very, very expensive car, and he was killed on the road.
Blimey. God, that is hard. And then just what happens then when you have you said you had a fall and you hit your head. So did you have a genetic thing that was in your sort of brain from birth? Were you saying at the beginning?
Yes, that was it was an accident of birth. It was something that had happened when I was being delivered, and it was just lying dormant in my brain. And because I tripped up the stairs and bashed my head in the iron railings, that caused it to start to grow. It's a tangle of nerves and veins, and they started to grow, and I started getting blinding headaches, really blinding headaches, and went back and forward to the doctor, and she kept saying to me, "It's migraine." She says, "No, it's not." That's not what the pain is. I know what migraine is. The pain is more to the back of my head. And anyway, I'd just come back from the doctor with the pain in my head again, and walked into the house. Now, it wasn't my doctor I'd seen that day, it was another doctor, and my doctor actually lived 2 doors down from me. And Gary said, it was much later, he said to me, he said, you phoned me. I phoned the house because I used to look after their children, babysit their children when I had Keith. And he said I phoned, but I never spoke. And he said to his wife, who was a nurse, there's something wrong with Sally, you better get the keys and go and check. And she came in and she said I was lying on the floor in the hall and my head was swelling. So she knew what was happening. This thing, it was a matter of time before the blood would be coming out of my ears, my eyes, my everything.
My God.
It was just, when the surgeon showed me a photograph, well, a thing on the internet, he showed me, on maybe not the internet, on the screen in the hospital, and he said, that's your head when you come in, the day you come in, and all you could see was the black outline of my face, my head, and the rest was just black. And then he said, now that's what you looked like after you had the craniotomy. And it was just like a pencil sketch of the outside of my face and my head, and it was clear.
Crikey.
Inside was clear.
And then, so they did the operation, and then after the operation, did you say you had a stroke the following year?
Yeah, the stroke was caused by an angiogram.
Right.
The year later, they wanted just to make sure, now it's well-known fact that angiograms can cause strokes, and so you have to sign a sort of disclaimer form saying you understand this, but go ahead and do it.
Yes.
But I said, I don't want a stroke, I've been through enough. And I was really fighting fit, honest to God I was. And they said, well, we need to make sure that all the mass has been removed from your brain. So I gave my consent, and an angiogram is 4 dyes, which there's a big vein at the top of your right leg, the top of your thigh. I think it's your right leg.
Yes.
And they put a stent in there, and then you watch on a screen what's happening. This, whatever it is, a fluid or something they use, is going into the 4 major parts of your body: your heart, your brain, I don't know, the 4 major parts.
Yes.
I'm not medically literate, to be truthful. And when the second dye went in, because it's 4 different dyes they use, the second dye went in, lying on the table, I said to them, I think I'm going to pass out. I think I'm going to faint. And luckily, I was in the right place. That was me having the stroke. So I had the stroke on the table, and as I say, luckily I was in the hospital, so they could help me immediately. Otherwise, there would have been even more damage done.
Blimey. God. And then once that, they sort of obviously saved your life on that one. How long did it take to sort of recover and sort of come home from then, from that episode?
There, it was very difficult, I have to say. I had to learn to read again. I couldn't speak. I do have still some loss of memory, but I've done lots of brain training and studying the brain, And the brain is like a mass of little boxes. And I put it in layman's terms, and I said, what's happening or what has been happening over the years, all of a sudden my brain says, right, it's time to open another box. I can deal with a little bit more. And some more. In fact, even now, sometimes something comes into my head and I'll think, did I dream that? And if there was someone else in that, involved in that dream, or what I thought was a dream, I'd mention to them, and they'd say, no, that actually happened. You didn't dream it. That actually happened way back. So the memory is slowly coming back again.
That's
it's
amazing.
Crazy.
Yes. And then do you then sort of rejoin the band? How does Middle of the Road, because obviously there's a massive change in the lineup during the 80s and then another change after the 80s.
Yeah, we got back together, I can't remember exactly when we got back together, just to do, I think it was to do a couple of television shows or something. I don't remember exactly.
Yes.
And we got back together, but then the two brothers, the McCreadys, they decided, they were always arguing anyway, and they decided to leave and start their own band. So they left, and Ken and I were left, and we carried on. So we just carried on as Middle of the Road featuring Sally Carr, because Ian and Eric went out under the name of Middle of the Road as well. So it was so people knew the difference between the two bands. That's why we went out as Middle of the Road featuring Sally.
Yes. Always good, isn't it? There's a lot of bands. I think there's someone once told. I think there used to be 2 Bay City Rollers and quite a few.
I think there's 5.
Yeah, I think the Rubettes had quite an extraordinary amount of.
That's right. They had problems too. You see, you can't register band names, and this is a problem. People have told me about seeing things on YouTube, and it's a photograph of the other Middle of the Road, but they're playing me singing.
Right. Yes, that's a bit tricky, that one, isn't it? Really. So when you got back together and you were Sally Carr's Middle of the Road, did you then start doing live dates again?
Oh yeah, we did. We started doing a lot of live gigs across Europe. Not any further than Europe, it was just across Europe.
Yes.
And, I mean, nothing like the Far East or anything like that. And we did. We did lots and lots of live gigs. But then it got to a stage, I think both Ken and I agreed, it was time we hung up the microphones, etc., because it was the travelling was getting more and more difficult. I suppose you understand that yourself.
Yes.
And especially if you were travelling for work, you had to get all sorts of paperwork done, and so. But we worked for quite a long time, quite a few years after that, and it was only 2 years ago, I think, we did our last gig. Couple of years, 2-3 years ago, we did our last gig.
Yes.
And we decided, Ken and I don't like the limelight, so instead of, as you get all the hype, such and such band, last tour, things like that, we weren't into that. We just decided to stop. No final tours or anything like that. We just decided to stop. We contacted the agents and said, we're still getting asked to do work in Europe in 2 years' time.
Yes.
And we keep saying to Rudy, who was the agent in Germany, was retired. Remember? But he still tries. His chances it and still tries, but no.
So is it the case now that you're just going to try and archive your material and the band and try to sort of leave a sort of a legacy on the website, and possibly, are there any dreams of putting a book together?
No, people keep saying to me about writing a book, but I don't know if Ken told you about the contract with America, with Arizona.
Yeah, so are they going to release some of the albums or all the albums?
They have. They've released 7 CDs. They released them a year ago. And then this year, they brought out the first vinyl. And the guy, John, is his name, John, I can't remember his second name, John, he was actually a fan of the group. And he was a businessman, made a lot of money and decided to start his own record label.
Fantastic.
And it's called Renaissance Records. He's a very nice man. I've spoken to him quite a lot on the telephone.
Nice. What's the label called again?
Arizona.
Sorry, I missed that. What was the name of the label again?
Renaissance Records.
Right. Well, so that's fantastic. So are you really pleased with having the archive all sort of nicely?
Well, in all honesty, and I said this to John as well, to me, it doesn't really matter. I don't have any children to pass this on to. I've lost my only child. But Ken has children, and he has grandchildren. So I think it's very important that to keep doing the interviews and everything else, and for Ken and his family legacy.
Yes. It is nice, actually. Yeah, I mean, if you could have whispered something to your 16-year-old self starting out, is there anything that you might have given them some advice, even if they ignored it? But is there anything that you might have said, oh, that would have been a good thing to have done, or focus on such and such a thing?
Well, I just went with the flow, because I was a female, and in these days, well, I know I was a female, I still am a female, but in these days, women, wasn't very many women in the music business. It was a very male-orientated business.
Yes.
And so I more or less just went with the flow, and that was it.
Yeah, crikey. And was there, with your material, is there a particular year or album that you're most fond of or most proud of?
God, it's years since I've played our music. I loved the music that we did, like the soundtracks. We did a lot of soundtracks for films when we were living in Rome. And I loved all that. I've got a soprano voice, and as Ken used to always say, I never really got a chance to use my vocals properly.
Right.
Because of the type of music we were playing or singing.
Yes. So was this the very early days when you mentioned Sophie Loren?
Yes, that was in the early days. Uh-huh.
Do you have particularly fond memories of the Italian time in Rome?
I do actually. There's some good times and there was bad times because Oscar was ripping us off. But meeting Sophia Loren, she's just such a wonder. She was a beautiful woman and so down to earth. And I mean, I have seen some of her films, and you think she's got an accent. She speaks the most fluent English. Something I remember very much about her, we just finished a session with her where I was overdubbing my voice over her voice. Well, I sang the lead track and then she followed it. She's a wonderful actress, but she wasn't the best singer in the world, as she said. So she asked for me to ghost the song first,
Yes.
ghost the main line first, the lead vocal, and then she sang along with it, and then they could take her voice off. They kept my voice on for a long time, and then eventually they did take my voice off, and we did 2 controversial film tracks in Rome where she was filming in them. One of them was with her and Marcello Mastroianni, and that was called The Wife of the Priest, and that was very controversial. And these are all on the internet as well, I think.
Yes.
And the first one that we did was The Married Priest. But this is where Italy was. They did a lot of very controversial music. No, that's the wrong thing.
Yeah. Oh, I'll have to have a look. To be honest, I don't know the work of Sophie Loren that well, so I'll have to just do some research on this. It's hopeless. Yeah.
Sorry? What's that?
I said, I don't know the work of Sophie Loren very well, so I said I was going to have to do some research on this, actually.
Yeah, well, as I say, there was 2. There was The Wife of the Priest, and there was another thing we did in Rome which I loved. You remember the song Ain't No Mountain High Enough?
Oh, yes.
Well, we recorded that in Italian.
Excellent. So you were singing in Italian?
Yes.
No.
I've sung in Italian, I've sung in French, I've sung in Latin. And I think one of Sophia Loren's songs, I think that was in Latin.
Yes. Because I have to say, you have got such a fantastic voice. I mean, all those, big hits. The vocal is always the thing that you get straight away, isn't it? Do you still have the vocal? Do you still have the ability to hit the high note or deliver?
Well, let's put it this way. I could still do it, but I would probably have to, because I don't sing the way I used to sing, I would have to get into studios and start to work on it. But yes, I could still hit the notes.
Hit the notes. Well, look, it's amazing. Well,
Every now and again, I do. I was a great fan of Gili and Mario Lanza, and every now and again I start singing one of Mario Lanza's songs, and Mama is the one, and it's very, very high, but I love it. It's for fun. I do it.
Yeah.
I don't sing a lot now at all.
Mario Lanza. Yes. No. Well, look, Sally, thank you ever so much for part 2.
That's okay. Thank you very much for thinking about us and inviting us onto your show.
Well, I have very fond memories. I was born in '64, so I was, at that age where I was very obsessed with pop music, and obviously your band and those songs were very much part of my, period when I was probably at that age of, I don't know, getting into double figures. But anyway, you were the soundtrack for a very long period of time during the 80s, weren't you? So 70s, not 80s. Yeah, so thank you. Well, look, this has been amazing and an incredible story, and I hope you've got fond memories of being in the band.
Before you go, there's something, I don't know if you'd be interested in this. A friend of mine who lives in the next village told me a story a few years ago. And he said, it's a true story, a girl that he worked with. And I was friends with John and his wife. His wife's now died. And John said one day in the office, this woman said to him, "You know Sally Carr, John, don't you?" And he said, "Yeah, I do." She says, "I'm going to tell you a story." She says, "You know, I've got a son who's, I can't remember what age he'll be now. I think he was in his 30s then." And she said, "I had him out of wedlock. And when she had him, that sort of thing was scorned. And she was actually on her way to sign the papers to give her son up for adoption. And Chirpy come on the radio. And she said she stopped, drew into a lay-by, and started to cry and thought, I'm giving my son up for adoption. But when he grows up, is he going to start looking for me and not be able to find me or something?" So she turned back and she didn't give the child up for adoption. And I think then she said she now had a fantastic 34-year-old son who was actually the love of her life and the most incredible help to her as she's getting older.
Wow.
And that is a true story.
Well, that's very sweet, isn't it? Yes. Well, it's interesting. The power of music, really, isn't it?
It's true, the power of music. It's very true.
Yeah. Well, look, thank you ever so much. Well, I hope you have a lovely Sunday evening. And, yeah, it's been really lovely, Sally. Thank you again for your time.
Well, thank you very much for inviting us.
Oh, no, that's fine. And I'll keep in touch with Ken as well on the...
Yeah, he's the one that does all this Facebook stuff.
He's
bothered with it because I got all the people that all were sending me all sorts of things, and I just want a quiet life.
Yes, absolutely, we all do. But look, have a lovely evening. Take care, and thank you ever so much for your time. It's been really amazing.
You're so welcome.
Thank you. Take care.
Yeah, my life.
Yes, take care and have a lovely winter.
Right, bye-bye.
Bye, bye-bye.
Bye.
And that, dear listener, is the end of a rather epic interview on the band Middle of the Road. That was Sally Carr, obviously, and before that, Ken Andrew. And a massive thank you. This has been the C86 Show. Have a great week. Stay safe.